Good morning. How's everybody doing today? It's good to see you. Looks like we have a couple of guests with us today. Good morning. Thanks for coming. It's Dr. Roddenberry coming to you live from Willow Springs, North Carolina. If you're in the audience and you're logged into your YouTube account, the chat bar is active for you. Feel free to type in a good morning or a hello. I know chances are we've probably got Angelina Yang in the office, of course. There you go. Just about the time I mentioned her name, she pops up on the broadcast. It's good to see you. And it looks like we have a couple of other visitors today. Thank you very much for coming. So, today we're going to be talking about stress and coping. So, let's go ahead and get started. This is chapter 11. This is the second part of chapter 11. Remember, we're talking about health psychology this week. Health psychologist is the subfield, health psychology is the subfield of psychology that helps human beings adapt uh, uh, behaviors that facilitate well-being. I guess is probably the best way to put it. And if you'll remember Angelina last night, the video that we looked at in the webinar, uh, that the Dr. McGonigal is a health psychologist, and one of the things that she's interested in is helping people learn how to deal with stress in such a way that they live healthier, more productive lives. I thought she was a great example of a health psychologist. And we're going to talk more today about what she mentioned in her talk last night. So, we're talking about stress. And stress has a major impact on our sense of well being. It's sort of this non specific response of the body to any demand placed on it. Now, what exactly is a stressor? A stressor is literally anything that you have to make a mental, physical, behavioral, or emotional change to. Okay, somebody closing a door in front of you is a stressor. You have to open the door to get through. Having something lying on the path in front of you, in a sense, is a stressor. You have to adapt your behavior to that. Having somebody yell at you, tell you something negatively, is a stressor. You have to respond to that particular environmental cue. So, stress is going to be the physiological and cognitive response that you have in response to anything in your environment that causes you to make a change. And the crazy thing is, you will see changes in a person's electrophysiology, in their heart rate, in any number of indicators when they run into a stressor of any type. Even if you don't really think you feel the stressor, your body is going to register the impact of that event, right? Now, last night when we were talking about things that stressed us out, if you remember, Diana said that she was stressed out about a wedding. And I made the joke that why would you be stressed out about something that's going to be so much fun and something that's such a positive event? But the crazy thing is, positive events can stress us out just like negative events can stress us out. Anything that we have to adapt to, whether it's something we like or something we don't like, can cause us stressors. And your book's actually going to talk, it's got a little chart about major life stressors that carry an impact on our health. Uh, Researchers did these cool studies, went in and surveyed people about the things that had stressed them out, maybe getting married, going to jail, failing a class, breaking up, having a new baby. And they had people fill these things out. And then they followed these people up for the next year to see who had major stress related illnesses. And what they found is that you can sort of assess a person's likelihood of having a stress induced illness by evaluating the number of major life stressors that they have in their life. If you're interested, you know what? Doggone it, I should have pulled that up. Major life stressors. There we go. Images. I can pull that up in just a second. And so let's see, right here, that's the one I want right there. So open image, a new tab. And so you can actually look at this right here. So there's a screen share of it. So these are the events, and you'll see that they each have different points associated with them in terms of the amount of stress risk they carry with them. And so if you add up the number of points and you go into your book, I'm not sure if it's 250 points or 300 points that you have, but if you have over this amount of points, you are at an increased risk for a stress related illness during the next year. So, stressors can be really big events in our life. And then, you know what? Stressors can also be small, annoying things that happen to us every day. Traffic is a stressor. Dealing with your child every day is a stressor. Dealing with your parent every day is a stressor. Having to get the lettuce out of the walk-in cooler every day because your coworker is too lazy to do it is a stressor as well. We call those daily hassles. Now, what I'm going to try to teach you today is that it's not so much the stressors that cause the negative stress response. Instead, it's what you do with these stressors in your mind that really affects how your body is going to react to stressors. If you'll remember in chapter 9, we talked about emotions. And a stress response is basically an emotional response. When we're talking about emotions, we're talking about the emotions that are associated with stress. And if you remember in chapter 9, when we were talking about emotions, I suggested to you there's the amygdala and there's the frontal cortex. The amygdala creates the cascade of the emotional response. It does the same thing in stress. And the frontal lobe, however, the frontal lobe can be used to control the emotional functioning of the amygdala. In the same way, we can control our response to stress by learning how to use our frontal lobe. Some people already have it built into the system because they have a good personality for dealing with stress. Um, some of us have good social support in other people that make us feel good and support us in stress. And then what I'd like for you to work on as a human being, what I work on as a human being, is improving the coping strategies that I have for dealing with stress. These are the ways in which we can protect ourselves from the stress that inevitably goes along with this modern life that we live. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But first, let's talk about the physiological response. Okay. Now, here's the thing. Uh, what a stress response is, what an emotional response is kind of this. You can speak about it generally as a set of physiological changes that occur in your body, known as the sympathetic nervous response or the fight or flight response. This is the cascade of physiological changes that happen in our body when we are faced with a threat. And these changes in the short term are advantageous for us and allow us to either run away or fight off the threat that is facing us. So, your body actually has a system that changes your level of arousal so that you can more effectively face threats. It's part of what's known as your autonomic nervous system. Now, your autonomic nervous system are all the nerves that go from your brain to your internal organs, the ones that you're not aware of. We call that the autonomic nervous system because it's not under your conscious control. It's autonomic, which to me is almost like automatic. So think about it as the automatic nervous system. It controls all of your internal organs. Now, what happens is you have an on switch we'll call the sympathetic nervous system, and we'll have an off switch called the nervous system. They are nerves that go to the exact same organs. So you have on switches, nerves that go to your stomach. You have sympathetic nervous connections going to your stomach. You also have an off switch going to your stomach called your parasympathetic nervous system. So, in a sense, you have off and on switches that cause different parts of your body to switch into overdrive, if you will. Now, what happens is this pattern, and the off and on switches are set to different places such that they prepare parts of your body when you need them and turn parts of your body off when you don't need them. Right now, this sympathetic nervous response is your body's automatic response to an environmental stressor. Look what it's triggered by. Do you see what it's triggered by? It's triggered by your amygdala. If you remember in chapter 9, I talked about the amygdala as your primary emotional center. It's what processes information and either tells you it's fearful or it's something good to eat. It's your real basic animal sense of emotion. However, human beings have a more complex set of emotions, and that's because they have a frontal lobe attached to this amygdala. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But this system is tripped off by your amygdala, your primary emotional center, which activates this thing called your hypothalamic pituitary axis. And it causes your hypothalamus and your pituitary gland to send messages that cause your that to create a cascade of hormone changes in your body by the hormones they release and by the hormones that they cause your adrenaline glands to release. Now, this causes this releases cortisol into your system, and it also causes your adrenal glands to release their hormone into your blood system as well. Okay. Now, and what happens is this causes a set of activations of organs that are listed in the picture. And this is sort of what happens. Your heart rate's going to increase. So an on switch, turning your heart on. Your bladder's going to empty out. So think of that as being turned on or want to. If you've ever heard of having the you know what scared out of you, they're talking about it sort of in a biological sense. It can happen if the animal is scared enough. Okay, you're going to see shaking, dilated pupils, flushed face, tunnel vision, dry mouth, slowed digestion, hearing loss. Think about it. Why does your mouth get dry and your digestion slow? They actually have on switches, off switch with the autonomic nervous system. Well, it's because in times of threat, you don't need to eat, and salivation and digestion are part of the eating behavior. So your body turns them off so that energy can be translated into your dilated pupils so you can see your heart rate, and your lungs are going to start working faster so that you have oxygen to fight. And so this is a cascade of physiological responses that happens that prepare you to fight. Now, what is the net effect of the sympathetic nervous response? You're going to get increased blood flow to your muscles, increased muscle tension so you can fight. Your blood pressure, heart rate, blood sugars, and fat production are going to provide you extra energy. So you're going to have extra sugar and fat in your blood that's going to give you a boost of hyper energy that you can use to fight with. And you're going to have you're going to get this cascade of, uh, of blood clotting that allows you to plug yourself and to stop bleeding if you're injured. So this is sort of the net impact of a sympathetic nervous response. It's going to cause these physiological changes to occur in your system, and this provides you in the short term with a really good way to fight and protect yourself if you need it. Now, here's the problem, Angelina. This system was designed to work short term. This system causes changes in your body that are good in the short term, but bad in the long term. So, increased sugar and increased fat in your blood is great in the short term, Angelina. It gives you energy. But if you have too much fat in your blood in the long time, you get clogged arteries. If you have too much sugar in your blood for a long time, you can get diabetes, right? Okay, and if your heart's beating at a high rate all of the time, it's going to be more likely to wear out. So here's the deal: this system is set so that it's good in the short term, but bad in the long term. Well, the problem with modern life is today our stressors never go away. Okay, a million years ago on the plains, the threat, the animal, maybe a saber-toothed tiger or a bear, would come up and attack the camp. And you'd have a sympathetic nervous response, and it would prepare you to fight off this tiger or this bear or whatever, and then it would go away. The animal threat would go away. You'd calm back down, and your sympathetic nervous response would go away, and you would go back to a normal physiological state. Well, the problem in modern life is the bear never goes away. Stressors are there all day long. So they cause your sympathetic nervous response to run for a long time. And if you run a system for too long without letting it recharge or rest, this system will wear out and it loses its effectiveness. Okay. Now, here's the deal. This guy named Hans Seeley was the first person to realize that even though and one of the things is when we have this autonomic nervous response, we develop sort of a resistance, if you will, in an heightened immune resistance because we might get cut. We might have some sort of bacteria get in our system. So our system heightens, our immune system is heightened to protect us against these possible infections related to injury. And what this guy, Hans Seeley, realized is that if this system stays on too long, eventually the immune functioning wears off and it causes the person's immune functioning actually to drop down too low because the immune system is worn out. Okay? And so he sort of had this cool model which explained why exposure to long-term stress would cause people to get sick, to catch more colds, to get more bacterial infections, to be more prone to environmental threats. And if you look at this model right here, what happens is as soon as you are attacked by a threat, in the short term, the first few minutes after the attack, actually your body doesn't clot or swell. And that allows you, because if your muscles swelled, you couldn't move them as quickly as you needed to fight. So you have this short drop in your immune functioning right after a threat, Angelina. But then quickly after that, your immune functioning is going to spike and you're going to go into what he called the resistance stage. And as long as you're feeling stressed out, your immune functioning is going to function at an increased level of activity. And you're going to have this resistance uh, to any type of bacteria or virus or anything else that might make you sick. But what happens is if this stressor never goes away and your immune functioning is always high, at some point your immune functioning is going to wear out. And the resources that you put towards this immune response are going to wear out. And your immune functioning is going to actually become worse than normal. You're going to go into what you would call the exhaustion stage. Okay? Now, so when it comes to infection, what will you see with stress? The physiological implications of stress. In the short term, brief periods of stress do result in an increased level of white blood cells and elevated immunity. It does happen. But people who experience chronic levels of stress actually will see decreased white blood cell count and decreased immunity, right? Now, people who experience chronic level of stress will also see these increased rate, and your blood pressure goes up. Your arteries are going to constrict and drive up your blood pressure. So you're going to see increased heart rate and vasoconstriction. And these are two states in the heart system that can lead to heart failure and heart problems, right? Um, Glucose, chronic high levels of glucose are not good for you. Um, and high levels of fat can clog your arteries. And also, this increased anxiety can lead to what we call non optimal coping behaviors: smoking, drinking, eating too much. So, in a sense, what happens is if you experience chronic stress, okay, you're going to cause physiological changes to occur in your body. These physiological changes over the short term are good for you: increased immunity, white blood cell count, increased energy in your blood, your heart's working harder. These are all great in the short term. But if the stressor never goes away, these same systems that work so well for a short term will begin to break down because they become exhausted. Your immune functioning will drop. You're going to have buildup of harmful substances in your body: sugar and fat, not good in the long term. Changes to your circulatory and heart system over the long term are going to put your heart and circulatory system in a level of activity that is potentially dangerous. And your immune functioning is going to drop. So there are real physical implications for experiencing stress. Okay. And this is that chart I showed you earlier. So major stress experiences predict the likelihood of serious next health changes in the 12 months. And people perceive stress with higher levels of perceived stress are more likely to get sick from virus exposure. And there was a real famous study where they brought college freshmen into a laboratory, questioned them about their level of stress, and then infected them with the common cold virus. And they followed up with these students a week later, and it turned out that the students with higher levels of stress and lower levels of social support were more likely to report being sick than those students who reported low levels of stress and high levels of social support. So we can see that there's both experimental and correlational evidence showing that there are real physiological outcomes associated with stress. That's kind of like the bad news of your amygdala kicks on and sets off your HPA, your hypothalamic pituitary axis, and causes these physiological changes to occur in your body. What you can use, my friend, is you can use this frontal lobe. You can use executive control. You can use the power of your personality to moderate the functioning of your amygdala gland. You can sort of, in a sense, turn your amygdala off or on, depending upon how you choose to respond to and think about these stressful events in your life. So, if you remember last night, Angelina, the lady, was talking about making stress your friend. Okay, now, if stress is evil, when we see evil, we get scared, we get a negative emotion because we do not like things that are evil, things that are the enemy. And that's what happens to your amygdala. It kicks on because it sees a threat, so to speak. However, if you embrace stress, if you make it your friend, think about the word friend, Angelina. When we see a friend, our brain thinks one thing and causes our amygdala to act a certain way. So what she's saying by make stress your friend is basically she's saying the mediating factor between a stressful event and the experience of stress is what you do with the information in the middle. And that's probably what the rest of it, and that's what the rest of this talk is really going to be about. And so you can think about it. So this fellow named Lazarus kind of came up with the first model in a sense of thinking about this stepwise process of having a stressful event. And he argued that human beings go through sort of, or all animals go through two sort of evaluations before they experience the physiological reaction of stress. And if you think about it, this kind of makes sense with your life as well. We go through what's known as a primary appraisal, where you actually decide whether or not the object in your environment is somehow or another a threat or a challenge that must be overcome. So as I look around in my environment, I see that there's a TV leaning against my wall, and there's a an empty garbage can over in the corner. Those are not threats in my environment. So my primary appraisal as I look about my room, I don't see any threats in my environment. When I think about what I have to do today, however, I do have a couple of things that I have to achieve today that are challenges or threats for me. I have to write a quiz because that quiz has to be released tomorrow. So I've got something stressful in front of me in the next couple hours. I have to go to the gym and do my daily exercise. That's not really something I'm totally looking forward to, but it's something in front of me. These are two challenges that I face. So as I look through my environment, my primary evaluation says that garbage can and that TV are not threats, but the test that I have to write today is a threat. So that's a primary appraisal. But I'm not stressed out yet because there's a secondary appraisal. And he argues that the organism looks at the threat and then makes the decision, can I deal with this threat? Or is this threat something that overwhelms me? And this is where students usually begin to have problems with their academic schoolwork. They will see that exam and they will say, of course, the primary appraisal, your exam, the paper you have to write, of course, it's a threat, it's a challenge, right? Angelina, when you have to write a 5-page paper, that's not something that's easy that you want to do. That's quite challenging and threatening. Whether or not it really stress you out depends upon how able you feel to meet said challenge. I know I'm going to get this quiz written today. It's going to be annoying and it's going to take me about 3 hours, but I'll knock it out. No big deal. One question every 5 to 10 minutes, and I'll have a 15-question quiz done in 3 or 4 hours. No big deal. I have the resources to deal with this threat. So, am I stressed out about this threat that I have today? Absolutely not, because although it is threatening, I feel confident in my resources to deal with this. Now, what you're going to find is that people typically don't experience that emotional stress response unless both of these appraisals turn out a certain way. Yes, it is a threat, and I don't really have the resources to deal with that threat, or I feel overwhelmed by that threat. Now, what are the mediating factors that are going to affect what happens during that secondary appraisal? Actually, what happens during this appraisal process? We can talk about personality qualities. Some people are just built that way. All right. We can talk about coping strategies that you might use. And if you were to go to a therapist for your stress and anxiety, these are some of the coping therapies that the therapist might teach you. And then we'll talk a little bit about social support. And these are all of the things that are going to help people, that are going to protect them from stress. And when this Dr. McGonigal was talking about stress and the response, she was in a sense talking about these things too. By helping others, in a sense, by helping others, you're building social relationships. So in a sense, that's finding social support. By coping strategies, by making stress your friend in stressful events, something you like and enjoy, is talking about coping strategies. Okay. Now, let's see quickly, because I am running out of time. There have been some personality styles that have uh, been associated with better responses to stress. Probably one of the most famous ones was just actually discovered by a cardiologist who noticed a personality difference between the patients that he had that came back with secondary heart problems. So everybody who walks into a cardiologist has got a heart problem, right? Everybody's got a heart problem. But he noticed that there were some patients that tended to have more heart problems, right? So maybe a second heart attack rather than a first heart attack. And he found that there was a personality difference that he could notice in the waiting room between the patients that didn't come back and the patients that had repeat heart trouble. And he identified this personality triad that he called the type A personality. Angelina, I don't know if you've ever heard of the type A personality. You may have heard that term. Oh, you're so type A. In fact, Angelina, you might have been called type A. Because, yes, I'll bet you have, right? And so he found that type A people tended to be kind of impatient. They kind of they got to their appointments early. They seemed impatient. They fidgeted while they waited in the doctor's office. They didn't like being delayed. They wanted to get in there on time. He talked to these people and chatting with them. He found that these people tended to be more achievement oriented or competitive, kind of like you're an achievement oriented person, Angelina. And he found that some of these people tended to have kind of bad tempers. They would fly off the handle. And he sort of lumped all of these three together under what he would call the type A personality, the person who's impatient, achievement oriented, and has a bad temper or is hostile. And so research sort of demonstrated that type A people had a greater likelihood of heart related and stress related illnesses than people with the type B personality. Now, further researches over the years, and this is the saving grace for people like you, Angelina. Yes, you're achievement oriented. I'll bet you might even be a little bit impatient, but those are not the real dangerous aspects of the type A personality. It turns out that really the riskiest part of the type A personality for heart trouble is going to be the person that has the really bad temper that flies off the handle all the time. So the hostility aspect of the type A personality is the part of the personality um, um, that 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 really leads to the negative effects, the stress effects. Now, a fellow named Kobasa did a neat study where he looked at business executives to see which business executives tended to have better physical outcomes than other business executives. Now, business executives typically are in charge of large groups of people, big divisions, lots of stress coming in because the decisions they make affect thousands of people and cost millions of dollars, tons of pressure. And this Kobasa went in to look at personality styles among business executives to see which personality styles were associated with risk, stress related illness risk. And what he found was that there was a certain personality style he called psychological hardiness that seemed to act as a protective factor in business executives, and led to lower levels of stress experience. He found that the business executives who felt a sense of commitment to what they're doing, uh, those who saw their business events more as challenges rather than threats, and who had high feelings of self efficacy and control when it came to making decisions and changes and controlling things in their business. He found that these personality traits tended to be protective factors for business executives. So, Angelina, I'm sure that you probably, it looks to me that you're the kind of person that really buys into this education thing. You are really committed to being uh, a college graduate. I can tell it's very important to you. And this level of commitment that you feel is going to help buffer you as you go through the challenges of college. Now, feeling confident that you can control your outcomes and that you can do well, you're going to see college as a series of challenges and not a threats, uh, Angelina. So I'll bet you probably have a great deal of psychological hardiness uh, uh, in you. Now, uh, uh, Seligman, oh my goodness, Howard Seligman, looked at college students and looked at stress-related effects on college students, and he found that those students that had the best outcomes, those students that persisted the longest in college, those students that were more likely to get through college and not suffer stress effects, um, tended to have a different way of explaining the successes and failures in their life. So he would go and ask people, "Hey, tell me about this success you have, and explain to me why you were successful." Or let's talk about your this thing that you failed at, and let's talk about why you failed it. And he found that there were sort of different patterns that people used depending upon their level of success and their ability to deal with stress. And he called this explanatory style. Now, when something good or bad happens to you, Angelina, you make what's known as an attribution. You give a reason why it happened. Now, you can say that this always happens or that this is a unique case. How permanent is this outcome? When you make A's on your exams, Angelina, do you say, "I always make A's," or do you say, "Holy cow, this was lucky"? All right. And when you make a bad grade, Angelina, do you say, "Yep, I always make D's," or do you say, "Wow, this never happens to me"? So you make judgments about the permanence of outcomes. Okay. When you fail in something, Angelina, do you say, "Yep, I fail in everything I do. I fail in school, I fail in music, I fail in love, I fail in this"? Um, or are you the kind of person that says, "You know what, I failed in this one area, but I'm pretty good in lots of other things"? On the flip side, when you succeed, do you say, "Wow, look at that. I can't believe I'll get it next time"? There you go. That's the way to do it. That's the way to do it. And so you say, so in a sense, you're saying that it's not permanent. I love that. See, when you fail, you say that failure is not permanent. And I'll bet when you fail at something, you say, "You know what? I'm good at other things." So your failure is not pervasive. And it's a learning opportunity. There you go. There you go. And when you fail or succeed, do you say it's something I can control, or do you say stuff like, "Oh, I got lucky," or "The teacher hates me"? I have a lot of students that don't do well in college, and they tell me that teachers didn't like them or that the teacher made the class unfair. And what they're doing is they're putting control outside the body. Exactly, right? And so, in a sense, we all have an explanatory style that we use. And what he found is that some people, the people that were more successful and had less negative effects of stress, when good things happened to them, they tended to see those good things as permanent, pervasive, and due to something that they could control. So and when something negative happened to them, kind of like you would say, I'll figure it out next time, or I'm good at other stuff, and I can change this and control my outcomes. So they had different explanatory style and optimism. And so the optimists tended to see failure as something that was limited in time and in scope, right? Whereas pessimists tended to see failure as something that was both permanent and pervasive. And this guy, Seligman, has spent a lot of time talking about how optimism, having a sense of optimism, uh, is a good protection against stress. Okay, so these are sort of, if you will, personality styles that affect uh, that affect oh goodness me, excuse me, that affect our way of dealing with stress. Now, what I'd like to talk to you about is this little model right underneath me. This is basically a cognitive behavioral model. When we talk about cognitive behavioral therapy, Angelina, uh, what cognitive behavioral therapy is basically, it's all based on this, what's known as the ABC model by a fellow named Albert Ellis, the rational emotive therapy. And what he suggested is that thinking is a habit, and a lot of times, people have what he called catastrophic habits of thinking. They tend to think of negative events in their life as being catastrophic. And he argues that this attitude, and I thought I had that in here. No, it's okay. That people a lot of times catastrophize the things that happen to them. This is the worst thing that could ever happen. This always happens at the worst time. I'll never get over this. And he realized that by doing this, by thinking in this all or nothing, in this absolutist way, people would cause really negative emotional consequences in their own minds because of adverse events. So when something doesn't go your way, when the car breaks down, Angelina, when you don't get the grade you want, when you don't get into the class you want, when you don't get the job you want, when something happens negative to you, what happens in your mind? And he argues that it's what happens in your mind is what determines the emotional consequences. So it's your beliefs about the event. And he argues that most people engage in a habit of catastrophic thinking. And so you made a B on the test last time. You said, "Oh my God, a B is ruined my GPA, and I am not going to make an A in this class, which will prevent me from getting to nursing school, and I won't be a nurse." Holy cow, what a catastrophic way to respond to an adverse event. And if you think like that, it's going to cause you to experience some emotional consequences that are quite negative, right? Now, what we do in cognitive behavioral psychology, Angelina, is we bring people into therapy, and we go through the events, the activating events that really upset them. but we do it in the comfort of the doctor's office where there's no emotion, so we can talk rationally. That's why rational emotive therapy is what Albert Ellis coined. And so, what we do is we sit down and we talk rationally about these events. And the first thing we do is my patient tells me what thoughts normally go through their head. And in the doctor's office, we talk about whether or not these beliefs are really true or whether or not the person is jumping to conclusions or using all or nothing thinking or some other maladaptive habit of thinking. And usually they are. We then sit down in the doctor's office and think about a set of more helpful thoughts. Let's call them disputations. We're going to dispute that irrational belief in the comfort of the doctor's office, okay, when the person can do that. Now, here's the tricky part. When the person leaves my office every week, they are going to try to, we're going to really work on becoming aware of when activating events occur. And what I'm going to tell my patient is when the activating event occurs and you start to have these irrational beliefs that cause you so much stress, let's actively replace them with the disputed beliefs that you and I worked out in the office. Okay. And what I want you to do is to practice this new habit of thinking. And what he argues is that if you learn to dispute these irrational all or nothing thoughts, then you get a different effect or a different emotional consequence. So, this is the basis for dealing with anxiety disorders, depression disorders, self esteem problems, lack of efficacy. What typically happens to people who have anxiety that is clinically a problem for them is things happen in their life and they have these preset, really horrible beliefs that are not true that pop into their head. And of course, that makes you anxious. So, when you go into your therapist, I'm going to give you some medicine, but what we're going to do is we're going to work on those irrational beliefs. Everything is figure outable. So, does that make any sense? Does that make any sense? Now, in the short term, you need some strategies. You know, two different ways of focusing on stress. Sometimes when stress does pop in and something just starts to get to you, there are two ways to deal with it. Number one is just trying to fix the problem. So, Angelina, if you have an exam and you know you're stressed out because you're not prepared for it, you're going to fix the problem by studying for the exam. So voila, you are then prepared for it. And that's going to reduce your stress. That's what's known as problem focused coping. If you're stressed out because you don't have enough money, maybe you get an extra job so that you have enough money, and that reduces the stress of not having enough money for food or rent. On the other hand, sometimes it's better when you have short term stress to find a way to just change your emotion for a few minutes, to hide that stressor from yourself just long enough to make it through. So let's say you have to go to a Christmas party and your Aunt Hilda is going to be there and you absolutely can't stand your Aunt Hilda. And every time you think about your Aunt Hilda, it stresses you out. Well, you know what you can do? You can go to the party and just avoid her, or think about watch the TV while you're at the party, or you can just meditate a little bit. So you can avoid, distract, or meditate a little bit. So sometimes in short term coping, if the problem's going to go away, you can learn to just distract yourself from the negative emotion. So, how do we fix stressors? Sometimes it's better to uh, to meet the stressor head on, and sometimes it's better just to distract yourself. Okay. Now, you can also sometimes talk to your friends to help hash it out. And then, you know, some people deal with the negative things that happen in their life, the challenges that happen in their life by making meaning from them. So when I got cancer, I could have been stressed out by it, But what I did was I said, you know what? This is teaching me a very important lesson about the value of life. And so every day I try to enjoy life because I said cancer is helping me appreciate every day. And so I tried to make meaning out of it. And so there are different ways to sort of fight through these stressful factors. You know what? I have run out of time. Go ahead and read the last chapter yourself, Angelina. Having friends, good relationships is a buffer against stress. And you know, it turns out being in a good marriage, even though I've been married 30 years and I bitch and whine about it and make jokes about it, being in a marriage, having a mate to talk to is a great protective factor against the negative effects associated with stress, the negative heart effects associated with stress. And you know what? Even though I'm not particularly religious myself, if you can find a sense of meaning in spirituality, be it whatever religion you choose to follow, it has been shown that spirituality is associated with well being. So, being married, having a community of people, either a good family, a good marriage, or a good group of religious people around you, is a protective factor against stress. You know what? Uh-oh, excuse me. That's all I had to say for today. I'm sorry I ran out of time, uh, Angelina. Sometimes I spend too much time talking about the unimportant stuff and I don't get to the important stuff. Just remember as you take off out of this chapter, remember the important lessons we can learn from health psychology about how to deal with stress. The outcome, the impact of stress is up to you, Angelina. Uh, if you can learn to have positive stress relations, positive reactions to stress, if you can learn to train your body to respond in a healthy way to stress, stress is not going to be a problem for you. And so there is a way you can use what you know about psychology to actually provide yourself a protection, a buffer against this modern threat to your health. And along with what we know about exercise and its protective factor for cognitive decline and its impact on levels of stress and anxiety, we can sort of see the value of health psychology and knowing about the link between the body and the mind. All right, have a great day. Don't forget to do the discussion board that's due tonight so you can begin getting the extra credit that I know you want, Angelina. Have a great day. I look forward to seeing you next Tuesday in class, Angelina. Have a great day, all right? Bye.